Okay, friends, welcome once again to Look and Live. We have to talk about the Great Reset once again. We're going to dive a little bit deeper here. And the video that we have for you today, that I got for you today, is this Great Reset is being talked about by Douglas Kruger. Now, I think this is the best intake I've ever heard about this matter. And we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to get right into the heart of our message. Make sure you like and subscribe to the page. Without further ado, let's go.
When we talk about collective ownership, we are often told that the great thing about it is that everybody will own. The reality of the thing is that nobody but those in power own.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
The Great Reset is an idea put forward by the World Economic Forum to fundamentally restructure the global economy in the wake of COVID-19. But what are some of the dangers inherent in this ideology? Joining me to discuss is Douglas Kruger, who's a speaker and author focusing on political correctness. Douglas, could you tell our viewers, what is this idea of the Great Reset exactly, and what are some of the risks attached to it?
Like many of the politically correct ideas that we hear bandied about in the media, this entire project is couched in kindness. It is presented as something that is being done or being proposed for our good and for the greater good. And that always sets my alarms and sensors going, because that tends to lead to very problematic ideology. In a very quick nutshell, the proposal out of Davos is essentially this: a group of exceptionally powerful individuals, predominantly in the banking, finance, and business sector, in alliance with government leadership, are proposing that as a result of these COVID lockdowns that have done a great deal of damage to economies globally, they perceive that they now have an opportunity to rebuild economies, but to do so in what they believe is a more enlightened fashion. And there are...
Yeah, so let me see if I can translate that for you. You got men who have taken advantage of a vulnerable state in society. They never want to let a good crisis go to waste. They're using that as a mean to bring about whatever change they had in mind. Okay, that's my interpretation.
Generally speaking, there are problems with the idea of groups of people in power deciding the history of humanity. In a best case scenario, we are simply supposed to be free to determine our own futures, our own progress, what we want out of life. Now, in this particular case, what they're proposing is a sort of collectivist idea that takes personal ownership out of the equation. The little phrase, and it sounds so innocent, is "you will own nothing and you will be happy."
There we go. So this sounds like consolidate the finance to a particular group. The few controls the finance of the many. Okay, this is socialist at its finest. This is Marxist theology, as you are listening to, in the name of trying to save the world, making sure that everything is, what is it? What do you call equity of fairness, as they refer to it now? But what does that actually mean? How does that apply when somebody works hard and somebody else chooses not to? How am I supposed to have this sense of equity and this sense of equality and inclusivity? You know, they got all these funny words today that they use for these things, but we can read between the line that there is obviously something diabolical cooking.
Now, if you go back just several hundred years, the founding father and first president of the United States, which was essentially a project founded on the idea of human liberty and freedom, pretty much for the first time in modern history, George Washington said, "There is no such thing as personal human rights without property ownership." And he said that for several very interesting and important reasons. But the principle is sound. If you are dependent on a greater power for everything, then you are not free. You place yourself as an individual in quite a precarious situation. It was, in fact, the formula for living, the sort of political reality for most of human history. If you look back at a simple setup like the serfs of Europe, this is a group of people who owned nothing and simply contributed to the overlord who determined what they could and could not have. And they had zero rights. It is the property that you own that actually ensures your rights to a great degree. So while this may sound like a very enlightened idea, sort of a communal, collectivist utopia, there are many problems with this once you start thinking about how it might actually be implemented. And that's what concerns me.
So, Douglas, is there a risk here that we could see an encroachment of state power into the lives of ordinary individuals and essentially a kind of creeping tyranny that takes hold?
Of
Well,
course.
economist and historian Dr. Thomas Sowell makes a very interesting point about how humans evaluate political systems. And he says we make the terrific mistake of evaluating them based on their kindly sounding intentions before the fact, rather than on their outcomes after the fact. And he proposes the idea that our world, our politics would look very different if we had to judge each thing that politicians and governments try based on the outcomes instead of the intentions. At the intention stage, it is remarkably easy for smooth politicians to stand up and say kindly sounding things. Now, the sorts of things.
when I think when I think about the ouchie Fauci and how that was implemented, do you remember from the beginning how well thought out and well intentioned it was? And the nurses were the heroes; they were celebrated. But the same nurses later on were fired because they did not go along with the ouchie. Some of them. It's amazing. Like it's always starts on a positive note. It never starts with fear, and it never starts with I'm here to control you. I'm here to take over. It always starts like that, and this is why we can't just fall asleep at the wheel in the name of trusting greedy leading men who are motivated from a power from beneath to make decision for us in the name of trying to protect us. Like that's just denial for us to actually think that some of these people really have our best interests at heart is ridiculous for us to even think
that we're hearing from Davos and from the likes of the proponents of the Great Reset all talk about collectivist and communal living and how nobody will own anything. But now consider for just a second, that is already a fallacy. Someone, somewhere has to own. And in fact, what happens is if you take ownership out of the hands of a broad-based populace and of many separate entrepreneurs and families and individuals, and you concentrate it into the hands of, say, a few multinational corporations working together with government, well, firstly, that system is by definition fascistic. This
Exactly. It is fascistic. And again, that's exactly what it is. It is government working with big businesses and making decisions for the powers that be for the people. And they're making decisions for their constituencies, right? They're not necessarily thinking about the people from beneath, but they are making decisions for those on top. And as a result of that, it always leads to serious problems. And a good story to consider is the French Revolution. It's good to study the French Revolution with the bourgeoisie and the peasants and look how that played out and what happened as a result of that. In some cases, religious priests and prelates were involved in that as well. Governments were involved, bankers were involved, and the people revolted in such a negative way to the point where they went far extreme. I understand the revolution, but they went too far to the point where they were attacking the Bible as well. So that was the extreme side of the thing. But if you understood how it all came about, it had a lot to do with how the financial system was set up and the level of corruption coming from, to be exact, the Roman Catholic Church played a significant role in the French Revolution as well, misleading and misguiding and false teaching people. And some of that, coupled with corrupt politicians and also greedy bankers, it led to what is known as the French Revolution. I think we're about to repeat the same mistakes.
This idea of an all-powerful government and the businesses that work in conjunction with them, it leads very quickly to cronyism, to the types of corruption that we see, particularly in South Africa, where we are so keen on talking about business and government collaborating. And doesn't that just sound like such a good thing, business and government collaborating? What happens there is you have the people who own the rules, enforce right and wrong, and have a financial incentive to be corrupt, working with the people who have the money and have an incentive to corrupt them.
Wow, that was a mouthful. Listen to what he just said. This is, drop the mic.
Who own the rules, enforce right and wrong, and have a financial incentive to be corrupt, working with the people who have the money and have an incentive to corrupt them. It's a dreadful formula just to begin with. However, what concerns me is perhaps on a bigger scale than that. When we talk about collective ownership, we are often told that the great thing about it is that everybody will own. The reality
Not true. It's a serious deception. And oftentimes people think, okay, collective ownership, this communal type of thing. We're gonna make sure everybody is fed and taken care of. Deception. That is socialist. That is Marxist. That is communist at his heart. And oh, he's gonna bite. He's gonna bite us.
reality of the thing is that nobody but those in power own. And that impulse to take away private property ownership and to concentrate it into the hands of a representative government is purely Marxist. I mean, it is the heart and soul of the Marxist idea, which stripped
Yep.
down to its basics is nobody owns property, it is collectively owned. And as I say, of course, the fallacy there is that it is not actually collectively owned. It is owned by those in power. Now, what can go wrong with that? Well, if we look at modern day China, we get a very good example of this one. Modern day China, of course, a bit of a mixed economy. They have prospered to the degree that they've started permitting free trade. However, they are still very much a Marxist society. And they work according to social credit scores. And social credit scores imposed by law represent a very chilling idea. Now imagine this, for example. You as a family do not own your home. You do not own what is around you. You do not own your business. The government has absolute control because they are the representative of collective ownership. Now imagine a scenario in which you do something that the government does not approve of. You read a book that it doesn't want you to read. You write an essay or an article that it doesn't like. You create a YouTube video commenting on something in a negative way. Now, those are all things that productive human beings do to critique and build and grow their society. But you can't do it there. And if you do something that the government disapproves of, using these social credit scores, they can ghost you. They can effectively lock you out of your world. And it works because you don't own anything.
Wow. Phew. I remember what Jesus says. What's the profit of man if he gains the whole world but loses his soul? What shall a man give in exchange for his soul? Satan is using worldly gain and the things of this world to bind people. I'm telling you, we got to surrender to Jesus. We need to.
It is that ownership, that broad-based private ownership, that keeps people free from government tyranny. Maggie Thatcher from the UK very famously embarked on a project to expand human liberty in her nation by trying to ensure as much broad-based private and individual ownership of property as possible.
Wow, that is nice. That is nice. She understood something. That's how people are free. That's how they're able to create generational wealth. This is how you are able to start something, right, and be remembered for it. But instead, some greedy individuals are looking to make sure you own nothing, but you'll be happy though.
In that, she was in agreement with George Washington, who said that it is property rights that prop up human freedom. You can go into great depth and philosophy on this one. You can even take property rights down to the level of your thoughts. Are you free to own them? Are you free to express them? Or
Yes, that's the point. That's the point. You see, when they start owning the things that belongs to you, it goes from physical. Eventually, it becomes mental. And then it becomes spiritual. You see, the thing is, listen, man, you give them an inch, they take a mile. And we can already tell on YouTube today, there are some words you can even say. Guess what's under attack? Liberty of conscience. Liberty of conscience. Your thoughts, Your speech is already being censored. There are some subjects you can't even speak about. When this Great Reset stuff is fully implemented, can you imagine what world that will be? I'm telling you, we better grow some courage and some backbones. I'm telling you, we're gonna need that today. Those jellyfish backbones, they're gonna do.
Or is the realm of thinking controlled by a collective? Now, of course, all that sounds, I
want to hear that again. That was powerful.
Your thoughts. Are you free to own them? Are you take prop up human freedom? You can go into great depth and philosophy on this one. You can even take property rights down to the level of your thoughts. Are you free to own them? Are you free to express them? Or is the realm of thinking controlled by a collective? Now, of course, all that sounds...
That's already happening, people. That's already happening. That young man who just passed, who just went unconscious on the field, Hamlin. You can even say, could we consider the ouchie as part of the reason this might be happening? No, we can't say that. That you can't. You better not. You better be quiet. Guess what's under attack? Your speech. If your speech are under attack, guess what else is under attack? Your thoughts. Your thoughts. Any man who controls your words controls your thoughts. And this is why many from the left, they weaponize language. They weaponize language. You can't say these words. You can't say this. This is strengthful. This is what they're doing. They are controlling thoughts by controlling words. You control language. You control thoughts. By controlling thoughts, you can even control behaviors. This is an attack on human character. It's so deep. This is why you need to pay attention.
It sounds like terrible fear-mongering. But of course, the question for anyone who looks back over history is to ask, could it happen here? Could it happen again? And I think if you do know your history, the answer is it happens surprisingly easily and it happens surprisingly often.
It's been said there is one thing that we learn from history is that we never learn from history. It's true. We are so doomed to repeat it. And we think, oh man, these guys back there were foolish. Bruh, friends, brothers and sisters, if I may address you from that from that angle. Are you serious? Human beings don't change. Times change. Technology change. Okay? Season change. Men don't change unless God changed their hearts. Humanity is the very same. As a matter of fact, we are more wicked now than we were then. We were looking at Adolf Hitler, Mussolini, and all these guys. We're like, these guys were evil. Yeah, they were, and there are still some wicked men alive and well today.
Communities play with this idea of collectivist ownership. I would argue that it happens 100% of the time, and that when we're talking about collective ownership and the elevating of the group over the sanctity of the individual, we are dealing with a formula that has been deeply damaging to the human species.
So Douglas, what about the threats to the property that we already own? Is there a risk there that we might lose our ownership over our existing property?
David, that's an excellent question, and it's one that I think people are not considering. Now, think again of those words. You will own nothing, and you will be happy. It doesn't allow...
Now, I want you to see something quickly, guys. As he said this about elevating the collective above the individual, I thought about what they said about Jesus. And you notice what's written in the scripture? These are warning. The things that happens to Jesus, Jesus says, if they have done this unto the green tree, what shall be done to the dry tree? In reference to us and those who believe in him. It says, this was one of the accusations that this, high priest called Caiaphas brought against Christ. And one of the things he said was, it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, that the whole nation perish not. Now look at this thinking. We need to get rid of this one man so that we can save the Jewish nation in the eyes of the Romans. So they were so determined to preserve their relationship with Rome that they were willing to get rid of Jesus so that they could retain that relationship they had with Rome. It is the parallel is that some will say we need to preserve our relationship with these moneyed men, with the bankers, those who are sponsoring us by any means necessary. We need to return our relationship with them. So therefore, we have to control, get rid of anybody who tends to oppose that. This is what's happening on social media, by the way. If you know, haven't paid attention, is that lobbyists and business and people who are sponsoring these platforms are determining what kind of language should be allowed on these platforms. They are the ones determined and saying, Twitter, this is not okay. That's not okay. Facebook, censor this. YouTube, censor that. And that depends also on their political perspective and view and religious approach on certain matters. So all that is being brought into consideration as well. As when you see your videos are shut down, you're censored for saying something like this, you have to understand what's happening here is the moneyed men are controlling these platforms to determine what is allowed. And if these guys do not comply, therefore they choose not to support them financially. And this is what's going on. Think about it in a much bigger and higher approach as well. That's what's happening as well. And that's where we are headed, my dear friends. So let's bring this video to an end. Okay, let's end this video.
Allow for you will continue to own what your family has bequeathed down the generations. The simple statement, if we are to take them at their word, is you will own nothing and you will be happy. Now, that poses some fascinating problems in terms of what communities already own. We largely around the world, we own our homes. We bequeath heirlooms, family heirlooms to the next generation. You might own a wedding ring. You might own things that you want to give on to your children. And I would argue that that is one of the very best things that we do. Each generation tries to uplift the next generation. This philosophy seems to be saying, instead of doing that, we reset each generation at zero and leave you dependent on a government welfare system. Now, from the most basic human perspective, that strikes me as deeply unhealthy. If the best thing we do is to raise up our children and help them to go further than us, then starting at zero with government dependency every generation, it strikes me as a bit of a chilling idea. If you look at basic stats, human stats, around groups of people living on welfare, you will find that you have disproportionate rates of marital breakup, of family breakup, of alcohol and drug abuse, and of interpersonal violence. The stats are way different to people who are self-sufficient, self-sustaining, employed or running their own businesses. So one of the things that I think people are not considering here is under a paradigm in which nobody owns anything, we all become a group of people living under the welfare state. And it seems to me that that is a very...
Oh, he is so spot on. I need to look into this guy. He is so spot on. Duh. That's exactly what they want to do. That's exactly what they want to do. The government becomes the husband. They make the decisions. They are being so sponsored by lobbyists. The moneyed men are controlling or working through political powers to control everything that we own and have. And every decision is made for us from on top. You literally becomes another one of those puppets, puppeteered in the hands of the puppeteer to be used by the government however they choose to. That's exactly what they want. It is crazy.
Good way to do damage to the health and to the psyche of human beings. We don't seem to prosper under such conditions. I concede very readily that we have to help the poor and the struggling among us. I mean, that is a Christian, a Judeo-Christian principle. It has been built into Western classical thinking for a very long time. But a welfare state in which you don't do anything, but you live dependent on the government seems to cause human beings to rot. I don't think it's a healthy scenario. We're proposing it on a global scale.
Well, thanks very much, Douglas. I think it's important that we interrogate the dominant narratives that...
Great. I'm going to put a link to this video. You need to check it out on your own without my commentary. Guys, listen, this is what it's coming down to. We got to end this video. Boy, 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 6. But godliness with contentment is great gain. Godliness with contentment is great gain. For we have brought nothing into this world, and as it is certain, we shall carry nothing out. Look at this. Look at this warning God gives us here. I'm telling you, God says the best thing you need today is godliness with contentment. Learn to be content having God in your life. That's literally what he's saying. And he's saying, listen, you weren't born with any of that. You were born with a hound, with a this, with a clothes. I mean, truly, we were born naked, man. Naked came out of my father's house, my mother's womb, and naked I go, man. God gives and God takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord, said Job. So it comes down to this, friends. It comes down to this. Are we going to be godly? Are we going to trust God? Or are we going to trust what we own and the properties that we have? Am I saying we shouldn't be fighting and wrestling and pushing back against this? Yes, we should. But I'm here to say, no matter how much we own, we cannot take them to heaven with us. That's the point of what the text is saying. We cannot. And if we have food and raiment, let us be there with content. God didn't even add a house in this thing, but he's trying to tell you something. The idea of what God is bringing to the mind here is this word contentment. Contentment, content. We have to learn what it means to be content with the things that we have. If we have much, we got to be content. If we have little, we got to be content. We got to learn how to abase. We got to learn how to abound. No matter what condition we are in, we must learn contentment. And that is a difficult lesson for a lot of us. But I'm here to tell you, a time is going to come. If you are not content, it's going to be hard to live. It's going to be hard to live in this world. And this is why, friends, a relationship with Jesus is a must. Having a relationship with him, your life transformed by the power of his Holy Spirit is a must. Or else we can kiss the future goodbye. I am not trying to be a naysayer, trying to fear-mongering you. But the thing is, friends, we're going to learn what it means. We have to learn what it means to be godly, and we have to learn what it means to be content. Because that's really the solution ultimately. But until then, we got to fight back for our families and our loved ones and our properties. Lord have mercy. You know this is going to get really bad, right? But it's going to be okay. Faith in Jesus overrides all the plans of wicked men. Until then, until next time, remember to look unto Jesus and to live by faith. Have a good one. Bye.